Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the way the local elections and Westminster by-election have been going, as there are, four main conclusions to draw based on what we've seen so far, which is still relatively early days. First, the Conservatives are yet again doing worse than expected in the local elections. Second, Reform UK produced another strong result in the Blackpool South by-election, which will worry Tory MPs. Third, despite the generally dreadful news so far, Sunak may find himself getting away with it if he can hold the two crucial mayoral seats which his party have been defending. Won't find that out just yet. And the fourth and most important conclusion, with an eye on the general election, pretty much the only takeaway from the general election, is that tactical voting has once again stepped up. So let's take a look at the tactical voting here. So how do we know we've seen a significant number of people voting tactically to bin the Tories? Well, first I do need to point out nowhere near all of the results are known yet. In fact, my full debrief may not be until Monday. But based on the results so far, of which there are plenty to go on, we can see that the vote share is roughly in line with polling so far. In other words, the pollsters have been close enough on the money. People have been voting for various parties in roughly the same proportion as expectations. However, the Conservatives have been losing more seats than those polls would have expected. So how does that make sense? Well, it means there has been more anti-Tory voting in the council seats where the Tory candidate has been vulnerable. This is exactly what tactical voting does when it's working well. It identifies the prime targets, focuses votes behind the main challenger to those targets. Now, yet again, I was concerned ahead of these elections about the impact of voter ID, and who knows, maybe things would have been even worse for the Tories if we never had this new law. A law which even caught out two Tory MPs, or one Tory MP and one former Tory MP in Boris Johnson. The man who actually introduced the legislation as Prime Minister and who then didn't take his ID with him. He did go home, get it, so he still got to vote. But much has been made of the fact that Boris Johnson once claimed that if he were ever asked to show ID in order to vote, he would take it out from his wallet and eat it in front of the official asking for such a thing. And as with so many things Johnson has said in the past, when put to the test, this did not occur. But the episode may act to raise awareness of the need for voter ID ahead of the general election. I mean, reported in the news, Boris Johnson didn't have his ID with him. Oh, ID? You need ID now? Hopefully that is the message that comes of this. And the fact that the Tories are suffering worse than expected local election results, again with clear signs of higher than expected levels of tactical voting, suggests that tactical voting may do more good than voter ID does harm in the general election as well. In terms of specific results, now I'm not going to mention any numbers in this video because they will have changed between me recording this and you watching it. Results are going to be coming out all day and then some tomorrow and then some Sunday. I'll go over the final numbers when almost all of them are in. As I say, that won't be until Sunday or even Monday. There are some notable results that have come out already that I could cover, but I'd like to cover all those in one single video when all the results are in. But there is a clear pattern emerging that I don't expect to be changed in those full results. One notable feature of the results so far has been Labour. They're being reported as losing ground in some areas with significant Muslim populations, and people are jumping on and saying, "Hey, it's because of their Gaza situation." Yeah, you absolute fools. But there's two things about that. First, despite reports that it's Labour, it's because Labour were too slow to back a ceasefire in Gaza, it's like, yeah, no, I can show you statements from both Starmer and Lammy who were calling for a ceasefire before the first tank rolled into Gaza. But they were trying to be cute with their language. They didn't call it a ceasefire. They used other words that mean the same thing. So they lost ground to the grifters. They need to get better at communications. However, even then, it's a nonsense. People saying, oh, they lost ground in Muslim areas. No, they haven't. They've lost ground in some council areas where there's a significant Muslim population. However, where the big swings from Labour to the Greens have been carried out is in wards not with large Muslim populations, but non-Muslim populations. So basically the swing is not in Muslim areas at all. So it's therefore much more likely to simply be the Greens appealing more than Labour in some of these areas, as they often do in local elections. It's not down to a culture war issue. This has caused them problems, however, in some areas, like they've lost Oldham Council, for example. But it will have no bearing on the general election, because these are all areas which are very strong for the Labour in the general election. These are not areas that are going to vote Conservative or Reform UK. So it has no bearing on Operation Obliterate the Tories. So when the full results are known, we will likely find that Labour gains are not as high as may otherwise have been the case. That is disappointing for those of us in Labour, but for the much greater number who don't care about that, they're just concerned that the Tories get booted out of power, their own losses are on course to be huge. As I say, not all of the results are out yet, not even close. It will take a while. We'll know more for the stream tomorrow evening, but reports suggested that the Tories were expecting to lose like 400 seats. Some were trying to say 500. I think that was their expectation management. Oh, we're going to lose like 500 seats, so that when they lose 400, they go, oh, it wasn't that bad after all. Well done. But the way things are going, they could actually lose more than 500 seats. You know, this would be huge. It's like last year where they said, oh, we're going to lose 1,000 seats. They really expected to lose 800. Then they lost over 1,000 seats. Oh, disaster. But remember, only about a third of the seats are up for grabs this year compared to last year. So if the Tories lose over 500 seats, that's way worse than losing over 1,000 seats last year. Losing over 500 seats would actually be the worst result proportionally in terms of the percentage of seats available for decades. Party chair Richard Holden, he's been out on the news, quick with the excuses. He said there was a very high watermark because they did so well in 2021. Now, this is absolutely true. The Tories were benefiting from the vaccine bounce then. Labour was still rebuilding. The Tories were ahead in the national polls. Now they're behind. But the question could be put to him. So why weren't you able to maintain that high watermark? Why weren't you able to maintain that level of public confidence? I suspect no national journalist will ask him. But one thing Holden said, which was absolutely categorically not true, he claimed that this was just typical mid-term voting against the government results. Mid-term. It was embarrassing enough when they trotted out that excuse last year. They could sort of get away with it in 2022 because it was actually mid-term. Last year, not so much mid-term. This year, it's literally the year of the election. This is end term. In fact, the general election should have been yesterday, would have been yesterday if they hadn't repealed the Fixed Terms Parliament Act. There's nothing mid-term about these local elections and nothing typical about the results either. In terms of what it means for the general election, people inevitably want to draw comparisons, but most of these comparisons are completely spurious. The turnout is way lower for local elections. And it's not just that it's a lower turnout of similar voters, it's very different voters. The ones who turn up for a general election but not local elections, they are the ones who are only focused on the Westminster government. That's all they want to vote for. Otherwise, they would vote in local elections. The issues are also quite different. But as I've said, what we've now seen is a surprising level of tactical voting, more so than expected. That suggests that tactical voting messages are definitely getting through, although I have been asked to just point out if anyone finds particularly clips, but any reference in the news, whether on television or printed news or online news, of any reference to tactical voting or specifically Stop the Tories Vote, can you point it out, please? Particularly to them, but otherwise to me, and I'll pass it on. But yeah, tactical voting messages are getting through. That is something which will have a direct impact on the general election. The strength of anti-Tory tactical voting is unmistakable. It's actually likely that this behaviour would be even stronger for the general election, because not only will it do more good, but the campaigns will be saving their voices to shout the loudest at that time. So then that's the local election so far, right? Then we come to the Westminster by-election, because there was a by-election. Due to the suspension and subsequent resignation of former Tory MP Scott Benton, the Westminster seat for Blackpool South was being contested. Now, Labour were expected to win and win easily. The result is no surprise. The Tories did not win the seat by a large margin in 2019. However, the swing to Labour was enormous, 26%. All the more remarkable when you think that people expected Labour to win anyway. You might have expected it to be harder for Labour to get voters out, right? Because everyone expected Labour to win anyway. But no, 26%. That is the second biggest swing to Labour this Parliament, after Wellingborough, and the third biggest since 1945. So Labour are still enjoying close to record swings from the Tories in these by-elections. That is an ominous sign for the Conservative Party. Starmer has pointed out that this is the clearest indication of these elections as to what people think of a Conservative government. In a sense, no, because it's like one constituency, right? But in another sense, yes, because this was literally a Westminster election. In further bad news for the Tories, Reform UK came a close third. Now, polling suggested that they should actually have beaten the Tories and finished second. So again, we could argue that the Reform UK vote is inflated a bit in the polls, but they weren't far off where they should have been according to the polls. So we could now maybe say maybe it's not as inflated as it has been. Some analysts in the past have also made the good point. Maybe Reform UK don't do quite as well in by-elections as polling suggests they should. Not because their vote share is being inflated in the polls, but because they just don't have the infrastructure to run targeted campaigns like this on the ground. They get most of their support from national messengers through the mainstream media, who should not be giving them the platform they are doing. They're giving Reform UK a much bigger platform than the likes of the Lib Dems and the Green Party. But that's our privatised news media for you. But this result for Reform UK was close to what polls would suggest. Now, that should be worrying for Tory MPs, because they will have been told, quite reasonably, by the way, by their strategists, oh, the Reform UK, they're not actually as good as their poll rating. Now, I was saying that was true quite recently. But this result, we need more than just this result, but this result, this Blackpool result, it wasn't far off for them. And it's not like Reform had a famous candidate this time either, like they did in Wellingborough. So the story so far is one of a nightmare scenario for the Tories. Lots of tactical voting against them. Reform UK getting another result roughly in line with their polling. However, I get the impression that Tory MPs are focused on their two existing mayors, Andy Street and Ben Houchen. Now, if the Tories lose both of those, and it's possible because some of the PCC elections that have come out so far have been big swings to Labour, then, maybe it is curtains for Sunak. If they retain them both, it sounds to me like he gets away with it. That's the impression I get. Obviously, I can't read their minds. Just the impression I get from correspondents saying things in the news. I think there's a very good chance the Tories do win those two contests. So the story of these elections will be one of worse than expected results for the Tories, but because they may win the two high-profile contests, maybe Tory MPs think, yeah, let's stick with Sunak. Their standards have dropped very low these past few days, haven't they? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.